Catchup, we are back for another episode. It's 2 weeks on the trot. This must be a long time since we've managed to do 2 weeks in a row, but we're here. We've got a lot more time on our hands, so we're able to cover all the exciting stuff that's happening across the Lowland League, the tiers below football here in the lower ends of Scotland. I'm joined as always by Chris Pow. Chris, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a broad day through here. I don't know what it's like through your way, but certainly
mixed bag. It's been very, very, very wet at one point, sunny, and it's now a bit dull. So I was out hoovering the car earlier on because that's the kind of exciting stuff you do as an adult sometimes. So that's what I did before I came here. But we are back. We're going to talk about probably more football this week. I'd be fair to say, Chris.
Yeah, we'll focus more on the football. Obviously, you see the end of the Lowland League next week, so if we're doing a couple more episodes, we can focus more on the west of Scotland and east of Scotland. So people that are looking for that sort of older content of going through the leagues and stuff like that, don't worry, your time will come. Because there's a few more weeks in those leagues. There's still loads of fixtures to be played and whatnot. So we'll keep you up to date when the title race, especially in like the west of Scotland, heats up, if you will, you know.
But don't tune off right now because we are going to talk about some of those leagues in due course. Don't think that's a caveat to just disappear. We're here. We are going to talk about, predominantly the Lowland League. A lot happened in the Lowland League. We'll start off there on Friday night. Couple of matches: Celtic B2, Cowdenbeath 2, Hearts B 3, Albion Rovers 0. Chris, 2 games that probably didn't really mean an awful lot, really.
Nah, not really. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think we said it last week, the only exciting part of the Lowland League essentially is at the top of the table this season because obviously there's no relegation at the bottom. So, yeah, we're just seeing the league, to be honest, to the end and seeing what happens, what we'll get to, and obviously what happens with the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. Those kind of games are, probably teams just trying to get to the end of the season now and, reshape and regroup for next year, certainly when it comes to, Cowdenbeath and Albion Rovers.
I've credited Albion Rovers a lot this season, obviously, but I think Cowdenbeath deserve a lot of credit. I think they only had 2 players signed up, similar to Albion Rovers at the start of the season. They're obviously going to be finishing higher than Albion Rovers. I've been impressed with Cowdenbeath, actually, and I think they're keeping a lot of the first team going into next year as well. So, yeah, fair play to Cowdenbeath. I think they've had a decent season. I mean, anything that's sort of below bottom half is probably disappointing for most clubs, but I think Cowdenbeath have got something there to build on when we go into the Lowland League East, obviously. So
I guess from an Albion Rovers perspective, they've done pretty well getting that kind of cooperative agreement with Kilmarnock, and they managed to bring in a few lads from Kilmarnock. They had Ewan Bowie, Grant Marchant and Xander Craig. Good young players who are, while not they make the grade at Kilmarnock, time will tell, but certainly going to be capable players in the Lowland League or, top end of West or top end of East. Definitely would recommend all of those guys. I've seen Ewan Bowie play on loan at Cowan last season, and I know Grant Marchant from really well, but I might get stick for how he pronounces his name because I think it's actually Grant Marchant, but I always say Marchand because I think of Brad Marchand, the hockey player that plays for Boston Bruins. So actually, I think now that I think of it, I might get a wee bit of stick for this. So bring it on. I'm not sure about a stick anyway, but yeah, some good players coming through the kind of ranks at Kilmarnock who I know will do good things. We were kind of hoping to get them ourselves at Cowan. Both those players certainly earlier in the year, but the cooperative agreement obviously makes more sense for Kilmarnock to put the boys out to Albion Rovers, and I think teams have got to try and utilise that, Chris. More so the cooperative agreement. I think that's something that's really been successful, we can say, for teams this year.
Yeah, we had a discussion about it, I think, when it was coming in last year, and I think we both agreed that it could be a really nice thing for clubs, obviously, in terms of how it operated, and it does seem successful, and hopefully it extends beyond this season. Obviously, I think it will.
I believe it's meant to be permanent. I've seen some stuff that suggests it's going to be a permanent fixture.
Yeah, and actually about Marchant, because I was thinking the same thing because I'm not as much into hockey like I used to be, but I know you are, Ben. But certainly, the Boston Bruins used to be I don't know if they still are, but they used to be a tough team, and he certainly was one that had the rep for liking a scrap or two. So
yeah, it's in the Boston Bruins, believe it or not. He's actually, I think, he plays for Florida, I think now maybe. He was a trade maybe a couple of years back, so he's left them. But yeah, bye. I think I'm saying his name wrong, but that's because I'm thinking of the player. But yeah, decent from Albion Rovers. I guess, Chris, we can touch on Albion Rovers probably just now in terms of their own kind of off the field situation. Difficult kind of time happening there up at Clifton Hill with suggestion of some sort of takeover coming from someone named Paul Riley, I believe, and looking to change the club's name to Coatbridge Celtic or something along those lines. I think Celtic aligned name for a football club. Like, we need any more of those in the west of Scotland. Certainly, we've got plenty of those already. I don't think we need any more, but obviously a difficult time for the supporters, the committee, the guys off the field to try to keep Albion Rovers as the institution that they are, alive.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think we again spoke about it at the time. Paul Riley comes across as someone that's very sort of antagonistic towards the club. Like, he's called them an embarrassment. To the people of Coatbridge, they've always been synonymous with failure and all that sort of stuff. It's like, come on, mate. It's like you're not endearing yourself to the fans. And obviously, he's apparently got a stake in the club now. And from what I've heard, I don't know how truthful this is. You never know until if he was ever to become one of the sort of leading people in Albion Rovers, whether this is true or not. But apparently, he's dropped all the name changing stuff and whatnot. But I don't know if I fully believe that, obviously, because he seems to really dislike Albion Rovers, which these sort of things confuse me, because why get involved in a club that you have such disdain for? It makes no sense to me. It's like I don't know, me getting shares in Arsenal, obviously being a Spurs fan. It just doesn't make any sense, Why would I be interested in doing that unless I wanted to obviously hamper them or destroy them or whatever? But it's stupid. It really is stupid.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think obviously, do the club need fresh investment? Probably is the answer to that question. But I think any investment in any club has to come with the right intentions and the right things for the football club and the supporters and the people who are there running the club. That's something that's, I think, you've seen in the past where people come in with money and maybe have ulterior motives and things like that to do things to the club and change things around, and that's maybe not what you need sometimes. Change is good, but it's important to maybe keep things like your traditions and stuff like that in place. I know they have also been taking a bit of stick for the potential price of tickets next season, Chris. 15 quid seems a lot of money to be paying for this level of football.
Well, Linlithgow rose at the start of the season. I said I wouldn't comment until the whole season, basically. We're almost there. So I'll give Linlithgow a wee bit of credit here. They have used the £14 admission, I would assume, for a better squad of budget, which they've actually done well. Obviously, they could win the league. Okay. So to me, that makes sense. If they just said, look, we need a better squad budget. In terms of £15, £14, whatever, for a Lowland League game, a Tier 5 game, it's not something I could ever agree with, because it's SPFL prices, you know what I mean? SPFL teams need to charge that amount for the price of stewards, for example. They've got other obligations that we don't have at non-league. I've been disappointed in Albion Rovers. Ben, who's involved, would like to come on in the podcast, but I don't really know what I would say to him in this sense, because it's just not something I could agree with. If ever, £15 for a Tier 5 game. Also, I gave them a lot of praise for getting themselves out of the situation this season where they were saving for a squad budget for next year. And most of their recent communiques, I think, from the AGM is they've done that. They have saved up for next year. So why are you charging £15? I think one of the words was, we're going to take advantage of the higher crowds or the higher away tendencies. It's like, well, you've kind of spelled out what you plan to do. You're just taking advantage. It's just greedy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think obviously that's the thing you probably think of. If you've got the likes of Auchinleck Talbot, Pollock, who predominantly are travelling pretty well to teams, I think that that's a way to make a few more quid. And if that's what they're doing, then fair play. My worry though is then if one team does it, the rest will follow suit, because they go, well, they're charging 15 quid for us to go to Albion Rovers, then when Albion Rovers come to town, then it's 15 quid for them as well. And obviously then other teams will be affected by that. So does that become the price? I think that I felt like that happened in the West a few years back, where it was predominantly kind of 7-8 quid for a wee while, and then it went to 9 quid, and then everybody's like, £9, that's the new rate. And now teams are charging 10 quid, to get into the West Scotland Premier League game. Cohen being one of them, when I was there, that was the price we set. But I think that's probably about right in terms of this level of football for an afternoon's entertainment. 10 quid, probably fine. £20 day out if you buy some food, couple of pints. That's probably a fair amount of money to be spending. I went to Rugby Park yesterday. Very lucky to go with a friend who had a spare ticket through the kind of friends and family scheme they had on yesterday. But to go to Kilmarnock versus Dundee, it would have been £27. That's for me insane for the type of game it was. I think £27 for that, and then you're talking maybe £30 if the Old Firm come to town, because obviously in SPFL you can charge the different amounts per per match, whereas I think in the low levels you've got to kind of stick to a kind of rigid pricing structure across the season. So yeah, price of football's getting more expensive week in, week out. I think that's definitely becoming pretty clear now for everyone. And yeah, if Albion Rovers are going to do that, then fair play. If own it, I think is the main thing. Like you say, if it is to get more money, to get more better players, then just own that is the thing for me.
Yeah, if they do what Lithgow done, if they have a good season and compete next year, then it can be justified. They need to justify that, in my opinion. They need to do well and actually compete. They can't be mid-table to lower at the lower end and charge £15.
Thing that I think we maybe spoke this slightly last week was that some teams in the Lowland League are going to maybe feel a little bit squeezed by the teams coming in from the west predominantly. Your Johnston Burghs, your Talbots, your Cumnocks, your Pollocks, Drumchapel, for example, who are Troon, pay pretty good money as far as I'm concerned across the league. Obviously, Johnston Borough being the exception to the rule, where they're spending subordinate amounts of money on players. That's a factually, to speak to anyone in that sort of kind of area of football, and they know kind of what players are getting paid roughly. Speak to players themselves, and they'll tell you, this boy's on this, and this boy's on that, and Albion Rovers and teams like that are probably going to feel a wee bit, in uncharted territory, maybe because of the teams like that coming in who can spend the money. And we talked about it with Cumbernauld Colts last week, where they have the carrot of Tier 5. That carrot goes away next season for all these teams, because Johnston Borough, Troon, Auchinleck, etc. are going to be Tier 5 teams. So what's the incentive to go and play for Albion Rovers when you could go and play for a team in the West and get waded in financially, as well as probably being challenging or up there in terms of the competition itself.
We might hear something obviously before we stop doing episodes, but certainly the Scottish Cup as well. We don't know what's happening with that. I can't see 50 plus Tier 5 teams all being in round one, but that's a conversation for maybe further into the month, I guess, when the season's over, because I suggest there's probably another prelim getting added there. So
I think on the Scottish Cup point, Chris, that you make, I think there's an idea here that the league certainly want to have their teams entering in the first round of the Scottish Cup. I think there's a proposal going towards the SFA on that, but I think the SFA's proposal suggests three preliminary rounds. How that looks, I'm not too sure. I think probably looking at the current teams in preliminary one going in at preliminary one, the teams who are currently going at preliminary two going at preliminary two, and then the Lowland League teams and Highland League teams probably going at preliminary 3. I would assume that's how it would structure, and then first round proper from there would be how I think it would play out.
Suspected. I mean, there was no way, like I said a minute ago, there's no way 50 plus teams at Tier 5 are all going in the first round of the Scottish Cup. I don't want to feel a bit like smug about it, but it's like when these plans were getting put in place, it's like you have to sort of think of the bigger picture. A lot of teams around these levels rely on that Scottish Cup money, and they've not only have they making promotion to the SPFL harder, loss of the Scottish Cup money also hampers a lot of teams as well. So I don't know. Again, one of the reasons why I'm against the whole thing in the first place.
Certainly, it'll be interesting to watch, and if that proposal does get put forward, then we'll wait to see kind of how it plays out. But yeah, you could expect to play, maybe probably still the same amount of rounds you were playing before. I think that's probably how it'll be. You might find the Lowland League teams maybe drop down a bit, having to play an extra round, but it wouldn't be any different for example, the teams in Tier 6 just now. So we'll see what happens. Moving on then to Saturday in the Lowland League, we had a number of games on Saturday. Bowness United 3, Cumbernauld Colts 2, Broxburn Athletic 2, Bonnyrigg 2, Cali Braves 3, Trinent 0, Civil Service Strollers 1, East Stirlingshire 0, Gretna 2, Berwick Rangers 7, Linlithgow Rose 4, Clydebank 1, University of Stirling 0, Gallifreydine Rovers 2. Where do we start, Chris? Linlithgow right back in the chase.
I probably got a wee bit of stick, obviously, from what I said, but at the end of the day, I done a write-up, obviously, analysing it, and it would say, I think most people before that game would have thought Clydebank were the favourites, because, again, it's another club that had it in their hands and then seemed to have let it slip, obviously. I think, them going down to 10 men, I think, killed the game from all accounts, is what I heard. And I've said this for weeks, even before write-ups and whatever else. I've said in the group chats that Linlithgow are peaking at the right time. You know, they've got players back. Blair Henderson, who we know is a fantastic forward, gets a hat-trick in that game. But it's not just him. I mean, Adam McGowan's doing well. Callum Ray's doing well. Lucas Stenhouse is a fantastic player. They've got Dylan Patterson back. I mean, all good players at this level. And had they had them all for the majority of the season, Linlithgow could have been well ahead. They could have won the league by now. You know what I mean? So it's not surprising that they've beat a 10-man Clydebank. But what I will say is, I know we've got that expectation. We've had that expectation with Bonnyrigg. We've had that expectation with Clydebank. We've had that expectation with Linlithgow. Nothing's over yet. There's still another week of football. Bonnyrigg obviously host Linlithgow next week. Clydebank host Cali Braves. I mean, even if Linlithgow draw that and Clydebank win, they've got the advantage on goal difference, Clydebank. So I'm not predicting that Linlithgow are going to win just yet because it's not over for me in terms of what the games next week.
Yeah, I think obviously Bonnyrigg will want to spoil that party. I think they'll feel kind of pretty much out of it. You know, they obviously they can win it if they win like by about, you know, probably 10-0 or 8-0 or something like that. There's probably, you know, a goal swing in there where they could actually do it. But, you know, I think they want to make sure that they spoil that party. They have had a kind of tough run where they're not going to get the results to keep up. And, you know, as for Clydebank, yeah, I think you're right about sending off. I think in that game itself, you know, to lose a player like David Syme, you know, so early on the game as well, you know, 8-10 minutes in, whatever it was, it changes how they play. You know, it totally, you know, puts them a wee bit put against the backs of the wall a wee bit, and probably them, you know, might get criticised on this from Clydebank, but maybe we'll try to maybe sit in, for example, and try and just get the point, or you know, try and win the game as close as maybe nick it at the end, for example, and you know, obviously. Rose have come out and, you know, absolutely smashed them, and that's just not unlike Clydebank. You know, they think they're a team who are, you know, well structured and, you know, defensively sound. And if you lose a player of David Syme's caliber, you know, that becomes a big problem at the back for them.
Go too heavy into it because we're not a Highland League podcast, but you know, it's a shame, like, because there's so many teams that have been in it this season. Trinent away, obviously Bonnyrigg. I mean, unless they beat, like you say, Linlithgow like 10-0 or something, and Clydebank drop points, they're not going to win. But yeah, they know that they've got Berwick Rangers who won their league on goal difference again, just pipping Brecon City. And Berwick are a fantastic team. They were a fantastic team last year as well, but obviously I think East Kilbride had a wee bit more about them in terms of their quality. I think it's different this season. I think Brora realistically will give whoever, if it's Linlithgow or Clydebank, a really good game. And there's one guy that they signed from Clark-na-Cudden, a guy called James Anderson, who I picked up in one of the Scottish Cup Team of the Rounds or whatever, I think, and that's the first time I was aware of him. It was a couple of years ago, but he's a classy player, eh? And you add that with what they already had, Brora will be a threat this year, if I can give them a wee bit of credit there for the Highland League.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see obviously how that plays out. You know, I think even, you know, regardless of what happens in the Lowland League, you know, Edinburgh City have been confirmed as, you know, bottom of the Club 42, if you like. You know, I don't think Edinburgh City are no mugs. You know, as much as they were bottom of the table, they've had, you know, a 15-point deduction. It probably started the season quite well and, you know, struggled on a little bit to get to that point. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how the playoff plays out. I think, you know, obviously we'll be rooting for Clydebank to do it as a, you know, a former West team. So hopefully they can, you know, get the result and, you know, things go their way. But, you know, if not, we'll see Clydebank hopefully next season in the, you know, in the Lowland League, and those guys will be another good team to have around in the Lowland League West. Elsewhere then, Chris, within the results, yeah, again, you know, not many games that are really, you know, really exciting, really interesting in terms of, you know, deciding anything for the league. But one game that does stand out for me, Gretna 2, Berwick Rangers 7, and what you describe as the El Bordo Classico, is it?
I don't even see it as a Borders derby, obviously. I think it's the Borders derby was always between Gallifreydine and Vale of Leven when they were in the league, because that is the Scottish Borders. I mean, if you look at it, Gretna are in Dumfries and Galloway, and then Berwick are in England, so it's not the Borders, is it? You know what I mean? But
dramatic.
It's a tough one. I'm going to give credit to Berwick. I think they've been on a fairly decent run. I mean, you look at the form, and it's not, you know, all bright green or whatever in terms of wins, but for who they've played, obviously with the likes of Trinent and Bonnyrigg, they've got a few draws in there from the top teams. So they've had a decent run, and Taylor Henry's had a few goals recently as well. So I got a wee bit of stick for not having him in the team of the month. But I did hear the wind was really bad in that game, which obviously can affect things. Obviously, defending against wind and players can be tough in games. But it's a standout result just for the amount of goals. I mean, I don't remember the last time Gretna shipped 7, maybe a few years ago when we were talking about it fairly regularly. But it's a tough one on Gretna, but a really great result for Berwick. They always seem to do this, Berwick. They always seem to start playing really good football towards the end of the season for some reason. It's a bit of a trait of theirs.
Cups are out there. Let's all start playing. That's definitely a thing we've definitely noticed. But yeah, as I say, another game that's high goals. They've got good value for money there. Elsewhere, the other game, Cali Braves 3, Trinent 0. A great result for Cali Braves. Obviously, Cali Braves had their owners' weekend on Saturday, which I think is an absolute class thing to do. I really like that. I must admit. And we talked about it a wee bit last week, but Cali Braves have probably been the kind of whipping boys, and took a bit of stick, a bit of a gimmick, and all that sort of stuff. But I think they're just really going about their stuff the right way, and I just really like it. And I think the owners' weekend thing just seems really cool. How the fact that so many people are flying in from all sorts of parts of the different parts of the world, America, Europe, wherever else they're coming from to watch Cali Braves. It's brilliant. I think it's just class, man.
I think a lot of it comes from jealousy. I mean, if you're a club at this level that's raised $2 million or something, I mean, not many clubs can do that. I think Chris Huhne has to be congratulated. I know a lot of people are against it because it's Americans, it's this or that. It's not like the standard way of doing it, but there's only so many local businesses around certain areas. You know what I mean? So there's only so much money within the Scottish game, obviously. And obviously, I think Motherwell tried to they saw the Braves, and I'm pretty sure they tried to appeal to the Americans, similar to Cali Braves have done. But fair play to Chris. It's been a disappointing season. I think that they weren't in the title fight, if you will, especially considering the season the likes of Lennon Walker's had, for example. He's been one of the, near enough the top scorer. Again, I've not checked this week. I need to start checking before I come on the podcast. But no, it's a great result. I do believe that changes might be coming afoot at Cali Braves from what I've heard, but there's nothing confirmed yet. So we'll wait and see with Cali Braves. Obviously, they still have a part to play in the title race when they go to Clydebank on Saturday. So it will be interesting.
I think the thing about Cali Braves is they own it in terms of, we're talking about that earlier on. They own the factor, they're out to get, people from all across the world supporting them rather than people from the local area. That's what they do. Obviously, if they want to have people come into the games. I actually watched the stream. I think you probably did as well, Chris, and it was Wednesday night. They had the live stream, and I thought it was brilliant. I mean, really good, effort from the team in terms of the quality stream and what they were able to offer. And I guess that's what people are watching probably week in, week out from all across the world. And that's how they feel connected to the club, because they're obviously making good content as well, which keeps, the people interested that are not here and coming to games. So, no, I've got full respect for Cali Braves. We probably gave them a lot of stick, in the past. But, I think fair play, hats off to the guys up there who are doing good work.
They do, Keith does a brilliant job in the live streams. And obviously, I think that a few of the supporters or the owners, if you will, do have watch parties and stuff like that.
Aye,
and it's
love it.
It's good. I know there's people in the group chat that just absolutely detest that thing, but at the end of the day, I think, especially in terms of technology, with what people are trying to do in terms of streams and all that sort of stuff, I think that's the way of the future. You mentioned it yourself last week, Ben, in terms of games. The only thing I think Keith, I think I brought it up a few times. Keith, he's not always the greatest with pronunciations and names. I think he had an absolute belter for Don McMahon before he signed. I can't remember what he was calling him, but it was hilarious. But yeah, he's not the best with pronunciations at times, but he puts the effort in terms of everything else. So if he improves that, Keith does a brilliant job with it.
Just we're talking about live streams, Chris. Did you see the bit of content the other day from, I think it was a Terrace by young Frankie Ferry from East Kilbride?
No, I've not watched it. I did see, I think the club posted out, but I've not actually seen the video of that yet.
Brilliant. I think it's great. Young Frankie's 13. He's commentating on the matches at East Kilbride for the highlights, and he's taking the job really seriously. And he's not You're not being, a wee bam like many kids, maybe are at this level of football, but he's taking his job, really seriously. Deserves a lot of credit because he does a good job. You listen to the commentary, he does actually, know what he's doing. He's, destined probably for, a career in that. I think if he wants to, certainly. And I know he also have some good support there from his dad, Si, and his media background, I'm sure will help, which is, what actually should be happening in that situation. And I'm glad that East Kilbride are giving somebody like him a chance, because we need more people like that, involved at football at this level, rather than hearing stories about, kids running about grounds and attacking folk and throwing stones at buses. You want to hear more good stories like that where young Frankie is doing a great job. So hats off to him. I really enjoyed that content the other night when I watched it. So fair play.
I mean, and that's not easy. No, I think you've done it yourself as well. Obviously, with the live streaming, I've done it with Spartans and commentating and all the technical difficulties that can happen. It's not an easy job, especially if it's just yourself as well. So I don't know how much help in terms of, obviously you might have help with the camera and whatnot, or the whatever else.
I think there's someone who films the highlights up there at East Kilbride. But watching the content, he's writing his notes. He's got in-depth notes about the opposition, how they play, the formations, all that sort of stuff. And from what I could see, it looks like he prepares that all himself. And I think that's a meticulous process in terms of preparing for games, and that's what what the wee guys into. I love that. As a kid growing up, my dream was always to be a radio presenter, at that age, and kind of have managed to do that as a, I guess, a hobby and some stuff in the past. But, if that's the young lad's, dream to be a commentator in football, then a good luck to him. I really hope he, achieves his dreams.
I think not even many pundits that we have in Scotland even do that sort of work, and they're getting paid for it. So yeah, fair play to the young guy. Yeah.
Moving on, we'll move across to some different leagues across the country then, Chris. East of Scotland Premier. Couple of games, that stand out there in the kind of title race. They obviously have less teams going up to the Lowland League East. Next year, I think it's 4 teams that are going up as it stands. And that kind of sort of title race, Camelon drew 0-0 with Musselburgh. Hillbeath Hawthorns lost 5-2 at home to Jeanfield Swifts. So that kind of leaves the table currently sitting with Hillbeath 64, Jeanfield Swifts 59, Camelon 58, Musselburgh 57, and then just outside the top 4 spots, Dunnipace on 56, and then it's a big jump down if Bonus Athletic on 45, who we know obviously are going to part ways at the end of the season. So it kind of looks almost done and dusted in the East of Scotland, Chris.
Yeah, I'm looking at one game in particular. I'll probably speak nearer the time to make sure it's actually happening, but there's one game that interests me later in the weeks to come. It's like what I said at the start of the season. There's a few leagues, I think probably all leagues apart from maybe the Lowland that's ending next week, that there's a lot to be decided so far. So we're not going to go into too much depth while it's still ongoing basically, and there's a lot of things that can happen. But certainly the game I'm looking at as the potential titles decider is early May's Hillbeath versus Camelon. And yeah, I might have some news on that a bit closer to it, hopefully. So
keep your cards close to your chest there with that one, Chris. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think I've mentioned it before, obviously, but I used to go to the Haws with my stepdad when I was younger, and they were in the Fife leagues and then the Super Leagues and the juniors and that. So I've got a bit of history with the Haws. So hopefully, I might have a full circle moment if I end up going again, but we'll wait and see. I'll let you know nearer the time, obviously.
Sounds good. We'll keep an eye out for Chris's one. Yeah, so I think the only team really there that can make any difference is Dunnipace in that kind of relegation. They're still in with a shout. I think teams that are 45 and 39 points just now with a minute games left are probably out of it. In terms of that, so it's certainly more interesting in the West Scotland. In terms of the 8 teams promotion relegation. We'll cover just shortly, but. We don't want to forget the South of Scotland League, Chris. That's something we do like to cover. But there was a few games here in the South of Scotland League. Lochar Thistle 1, Dalbeattie Star 3, Newton Stewart 1, Stranraer Reserves 1, Nithsdale Wanderers 3, Creetown 3, Wigtown Bladnoch 1, Abbeyvale 0. So looking at the league table then, Chris, Stranraer Reserves on 47, Dalbeattie Star on 46, Lochar Thistle on 37, Newton Stewart on 35. Now we know that 2 teams are going to get promoted into the new Lowland League West. So we know for a fact, Chris, that Dalbeattie and Newton Stewart have the licences, as well as Creetown. Dalbeattie sitting on 46, Newton Stewart on 35. Some debate about whether Stranraer reserves may come into the new setup, but I mean, I don't know enough about Stranraer reserves myself to know, how they're set up or what they're about. But I don't know where they play, for example. Have they got the ability to move into the Lowland League West? I'm not too sure in terms of how that would work with licences and obviously reserve teams and things like that. Stranraer, were they looking to go in through the promotion route rather than this kind of guest club route that Celtic B and Hearts B have had? I don't know how that's going to work if you can have essentially a B team as a member club.
I mean, it wouldn't be too different. I wouldn't imagine to obviously the B teams in the east of Scotland, for example, but as member clubs. But I have heard. I think we maybe touched on it in the last episode, briefly. But I have heard they might fancy, basically, if Stranraer reserves win, they might fancy a stint in the Lowlands. But I don't know if it would work or it is actually happening or it's just maybe rumours, as you know, with these levels. But I think nearer the time it will come out. There was obviously a big chat about Dalbeattie in the group chat. Obviously, I think a lot of people would be excited to see them back in the Lowland League, for example, in the Lowland League West. Big rivalry with Gretna, proper rival, no something El Bordeco or whatever it's called. So but Dalbeattie, honestly, God, out of all the clubs that have left the Lowland League, from the ones that have went down anyway, I probably do miss them the most, because I think they're just a fantastic club. And I mean, I've always said I don't like the camel trek, but certainly in terms of the club and the vibe of them, basically how fun they are, I think Dalbeattie would be a welcome addition back into the Lowland. So yeah, I would look forward to that as well.
Watch this space certainly to see what happens with Stranraer reserves, but if not, probably looking likely Dalbeattie and I think Newton Stewart look like the two that are probably going to get promoted in terms of licensing. So yeah, we'll watch this space. Moving on then to the West of Scotland, we'll look at the Premier Division in a bit more depth. Athley 2, Shotts 1, Bees 2, Cumnock 4, Glenafton 1, Renfrew 3, Kilwinning Rangers 3, Hereford United 2, Brotherly Glencairn 1, Johnstone Borough 3, St Canice 2, Drumchapel 2, and Troon 1, Pollock 0. So the first thing is, to say there, congratulations to Troon, who confirmed promotion, having hit the kind of points that will make sure they will be one of the top 9 clubs in the league to get promoted. So yeah, fair play to them. I think elsewhere, it's now interesting, at the top, Auchinleck, Troon, and Cumnock all vying for that top of the table kind of positions.
I kind of see them similar to Cumbernauld Colts, where they've actually kind of built a good team over the last sort of few years. They've brought in players here and there, and I think the management's been fantastic from Troon. They really, to me now, I think from the season before, I wasn't expecting much from Troon, but coming into this season, I actually did expect them to do well. To be top of the league, I know obviously Cumnock are chasing them down and Talbot have a few games in hand, but I think it's been a brilliant season. To see them in the Lowland, I would be I'd be happy to do that. I think they are one of the top West of Scotland teams now. I think they've proved it over the last few seasons, and yeah, fair play to them. We used to have a wee bit of a banter with them, obviously.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. When it comes to that whole league. Auchinleck have also got 4 games in hand currently, Chris. A bit of call it a fixture pileup. Is that what we call it?
Yeah, I done the math, as you probably saw my tweet. I'm surprised Kenny Young never responded to it, but I mean, all I done was state facts. So from now until the end of the league season, anyway, I mean, they're getting 2.5 days rest between fixtures on average, which is to me it's ridiculous for a part-time team. I know. I actually had to look. I actually had to look, right, because I find it interesting. I've had issues with the Lowland League schedule too, by the way, as you know, because obviously I said as much on the Team of the Month when Cumbernauld won the Lowland League Cup, because I think that's been the issue the last couple of seasons. Obviously, the Lowland League Cup getting changed into the season rather than being at the end. So, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, because I have to keep up with these things, there has been an increase in injuries, and a lot of teams towards the end of the season have fallen away because they're basically bare bones. Broxburn, for example, Trinent, for example. Obviously, that works the other way too, where Linlithgow of getting boys back at the right time. But it's worrying it's worrying for me because at the end of the day, I know we have listeners, we have fans, but really, in my opinion, the guys that should always come first are the players, because they're the guys we go and see on a Saturday. They're the guys that entertain us, essentially. We pay their money to go and see them. And when you get part-time players, say, playing so many games, it's unsafe. It really is. I'm actually concerned for the players' safety, not just physically, but mentally. I mean, you look how we talked about Stirling Uni, for example. The amount of games they play over the course of the season is so much, and we've seen them falling away. Recently, obviously, the morale's probably rock bottom there at the moment. And I always wonder, like a lot of people say, they play the Bucks on a Wednesday, which is well known. So why are Lowland League games getting put on a Wednesday for them? Can you not put them on a Tuesday so that they at least can have it on a different day? It makes no sense. We know certain things about who's going to be in the Junior Cup, who's going to be in this cup. There has to be a better way of rearranging fixtures. And going back to my earlier point, so the Lowland plays a lot of midweek games earlier in the season to kind of prepare, if you will, for the cup games and whatever else. But I went and looked at Auchinleck Talbot's schedule. They played one midweek game from the start of the season to December. In fact, no, we'll call it two. We'll say that the Friday game, we'll count Friday as a midweek, so two. In comparison to someone like Cumbernauld Colts, who played 6. You know what I mean? It's it's a continuous issue with the West of Scotland for whatever reason. There always seems to be one of the leading clubs that we've seen it with Darvel, we've seen it, and it's not just on the fixture secretary, but surely you have to learn from your mistakes.
So, firstly, I think for me, the one thing that stands out is some of these teams make a choice to play in multiple cups. They don't have to play in. The Junior Cup, the Communities Cup, if you want to call it, is an optional competition, as is the South Challenge Cup, as of this season for the West of Scotland. So they don't have to play in both of those cups. If they think the Communities Cup's more important than the South Challenge Cup, they should bin the South Challenge Cup off, as far as I'm concerned. They obviously put in the Scottish Cup and the West Scotland League Cup. They've had a big run in the West Scotland League Cup, where they're going to be the final against Troon, and they're playing today in a semi-final of the Communities Cup. So from Auchinleck's perspective, they are playing a lot of games because they have cup competitions. Now, for me, if it was my club, formerly Berwick Rangers, let's take that as an example, had I been in a situation where I knew I had all these games coming up, I 100% would be playing games midweek. So if you're playing a Junior Cup match, for example, a Scottish Communities Cup match on Saturday in September, I'd be making sure that my next midweek game, the following week or the 10 days later, whatever it is a league game. And making sure I'm getting games in. They've got their floodlights, they can do it. There's not an issue. Their park is one of the best parks in the country, at any level, not just at our level. Probably pitch-wise, it's one of the best, if not the best, certainly in the lower leagues. So they've got the facilities to do it. Now, as I understand it, Auchinleck particularly don't really want to play midweek, or they don't want to play Fridays, for example. They want to play Saturdays because that's what the day is for football, and that's where they get the biggest gates and all that sort of stuff. So you ultimately, for me, you make your bed, you lie in it, as far as I'm concerned. I took a bit of stick with Johnston Borough, similarly, where Johnston Borough had a Communities Cup game organised, and if the game was off, they were going to have a little league game against Largs in January. They organised, if this game's off, we'll play Largs away or home, I think it was, whatever it was. I disagree with that as well. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think if you've got a fixture list, you've got to stick to it. And if you can't just be putting games in to give yourself an easier run. You should have played that game on the Wednesday or the Tuesday, whatever it was. If you wanted to play that Largs game, if that was something that the other team's amenable to. Clubs can go to the league to actually organise the games. If they can find an opponent who's prepared to play a game, midweek, then you can absolutely do that. That's within your gift to do. You don't have to, to give the league 7 days notice or something like that to say you want to play a game midweek. So yeah, they're in this situation. They never learn as well. They're always in this situation every season, and have done for God knows how long. So Yeah, I don't have a lot of sympathy personally for the club perspective. I see where you're coming from the player perspective. That kind of welfare and stuff like that. That's a fair point to make. I know that, for example, Campbelltown in the 4th division are playing yesterday and today, and then there's some teams expected to go, play a home game, in a few weeks, and then go travel to Campbelltown on the Sunday after playing on the Saturday. That's fucking bonkers as far as I'm concerned. But Campbelltown obviously a difficult location to get to in terms of the league, but I think we have to do something to change it and make it better. That's something I think is really, really important.
I totally get your point that it's not just on the leagues. I mean, I've heard of clubs trying to rearrange fixtures, and they'll be like, "Oh, we've got that boy away, or that guy's injured. Oh, let's not play though." Yeah, so the clubs are to blame as well, 100%. I didn't know the complete ins and outs with Auchinleck or why they hadn't played many midweek fixtures, but it's simple math. If you get through another round of a cup or another round of this, that, and the next thing, you're going to have so many games. You know what I mean? So the thing about the cups, there's far too many cups to keep track of. But what I would say is, like what I said before, we should know who's in what cup at the start of the season that we can rearrange it. For example, if say Auchinleck and Largs are in the Communities Cup and they're playing that particular Saturday, do not have them playing, Johnson, Bra and bloody Hurlford, because they know they're playing in that cup. Just rearrange the schedule. I mean, to me, it's simple. It's like what I said about Stirling Union. Why is the league putting them games on a Wednesday when they have the Bucks? It makes no sense. Like, I know people are like, "Oh, well, you're giving them an advantage." Well, how? They're still playing the fixtures. You know what I mean? And Auchinleck, if they get through to the Community Cup final, I mean, they're going to play all these games in a mad rush. Then they're going to have 2 weeks rest. To me, that's ridiculous. And I know, you need to get the league season done. You need that. There's no playoff this year. So why are we rushing to get fixtures done? Maybe the something that I don't in terms of that. Maybe it has to be done by a certain date. But as I understand it, there's no playoffs. So why does it have to be finished on this date? Or whatever. I don't, they should give them some leeway there.
Yeah, I probably can. I don't know for certain, but I think it wouldn't be fair on clubs who have played all their fixtures. For example, take Largs as an example. We're playing them on the last game of the season, the 16th of May. Sorry, 16th of May, last game of the season. So, have then, if we extend the season, does it mean like Largs, Renfrew, Hurlford, for example, have to continue playing or not playing and then waiting to play Auchinleck, for example, at the end? No one wins. I think that's the problem. There's never going to be everybody happy, and it's like everything else. It's always the same. But yeah, it'll be certainly one to watch to see how it goes. I think obviously everyone wants to win leagues, but I think the focus should really be on promotion. Training, it looks like Cumnock have pretty much done that. Auchinleck are probably not going to be far away given their matches in hand. Then we're probably looking at, Largs look pretty close. I would say Pollock are pretty close as well. Johnston Borough, again, have been thereabouts. So it's just the kind of bottom 4 teams, I would say. That.
I'll throw this in, by the way, Ben, because I think as well as a few others, I think I've been a wee bit unfair on. At the start of the season, they brought in a lot of sort of lower-end players, and I thought Pollock were going to have a terrible season, and they haven't. And to their credit, I think they've actually been a lot better than certainly I expected. So I just had to give them a wee bit of a shout out there, because truly I think they've surprised me in a really good way, where I think they have sort of improved.
I think they obviously gambled. I think it was well documented that they had financial issues and having to cut budgets and things like that. I think Max has been pretty vocal about that. They had the whole drama with one of the committee members trying to create a poll or something like that to see if Maxi should keep his job or something like that on one of their Facebook groups or something, which is fucking mental. But anyway, that's certainly, from Paul's perspective, they did gamble, and then they have loaded up on a bit more experience. They got, Stuart McCann comes back from Clydebank, Carlo Monti comes back from Chapel, and, a couple of guys at the back. They signed KP McAllister and goal as well, capable players who, are much more experienced at this level than some of the young boys that they had in the league. So, fair play to the guys up at Pollock. It was certainly turned a corner. I'm glad, because Pollock are a big team. They're certainly a big side, and very capable of being big things. They had finances in the past which helped, and I think now that they're starting to readjust and looks like they're kind of finding their feet a bit more, and looks like they're going to get promoted. So fair play to Pollock. Elsewhere, then go down the leagues. Then in 7th place, Atherley, 8th place, Hurlford, like we mentioned there, out of it because of lack of licence. Drumchapel on 9th, Cowan Rangers in 10th, Renfrew on 11th, Glenafton are 12th, Beath are 13th, Shotts 14th, Rutherglen and St Cadoc's are second bottom and bottom. So, I think for me, it's now we know it's confirmed there's 9 teams that are going to get promoted from the West of Scotland. Is that kind of bottom end now? There's obviously discussions about Renfrew potentially going to get a licence now. I don't know how this is going to work. We've seen some documentation, some stuff has been said that Jimmy Quigley's going to step down to focus on getting his badges, and Ryan Boris will take the team as manager because he has the badges now. I'm sure the West of Scotland rules stated that you have to have your licence recommendation by the end of the 31st of March. Now, I haven't seen in the documentation from SFA that suggests that Renfrew had their licence or had a recommendation for the licence. Drumchapel had a situation where they had to wait for PVGs or something like that, and then they were, given an extension. I don't see anything that suggests that Renfrew have that, and I'd be pretty gutted to find out if Renfrew then, get a licence in April and then are recommended for, are then the promotion playoff, because I don't think the West of Scotland rules allow that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because that'll change the dynamic of the bottom, team 8, 9, 10 potentially getting promoted. So how do you think it'll shape up, Chris?
I mean, I wrote that off as pure nonsense last week. So, I mean, I've never heard of that. I've heard obviously exceptions being made for one club to be promoted to, like, say, the Lowland League, for example. But when there's a group of clubs coming up, I mean, that would just be a farce, in my opinion, if someone got extra time to, because we're way past deadlines now, you know what I mean? So that's why I wrote it off. If I'm wrong about it, I'll admit I'm wrong about it, but I'll have a few criticisms to lodge, I guess, on the podcast. Nothing against Renfrew, obviously.
I think the thing for me is the lack of clarity going into this, such a, important part of the season. I think the West of Scotland were asked, to comment on, who would and who wouldn't have a licence, and they didn't. They said they wouldn't comment. It was up for the clubs to decide whether or not they would, put some information out in the public domain, and we kind of waited for teams to find out. And, obviously Drumchapel, I mentioned they had a, an extension and fair play, because it was waiting for paperwork, but it still was within the deadline, the 31st of March deadline that was, set at the beginning of the season. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I guess, it's going to be important down at that bottom end with the likes of, Beath, Glenafton, potentially Renfrew, like we've just said, Cowan and Rangers, and then maybe Drumchapel. I think Drumchapel, for me, Chris, since Adams Hopes has left to go to Hamilton on a kind of full-time basis, the wheels have come off at Drumchapel. I feel like they're, really struggling, to get going. And they're now sitting 3 points behind Cowan with, Cowan got a game in hand on Drumchapel as well. Renfrew got 2 games in hand, sitting in 30. Glenafton got 1 game in hand in 29. So, Drumchapel are in real danger, I think, for me, to get, to miss out on promotion at this point in time. If they keep going, the way they are, and not getting wins in the table, because the other teams are fighting for their lives trying to get points. Cowan took a win right to the death yesterday. I think Renfrew got some points as well. So it's certainly looking, like it could be interesting. Then obviously Beath, a little bit further out of it, but not by any means, completely out of it yet. So it's going to be a lot. We'll talk about it, I guess, in a lot more detail, Chris. But Drumchapel, what do you think?
I actually think there's been a few clubs in the West. I've went through a similar thing, really. Brother Glencairn, that I've struggled a lot as well. So yeah, it just shows you, like, it could be a player, it could be a coach, it could be a manager, it could be someone in the behind the scenes. Sometimes one person could leave a club, or a couple of people leave a club, and it just all goes pear-shaped. And I think that's what we're seeing with Drumchapel, and I think you're bang on. I think it's going to be tough for them to really push now, I would say. Once we get past sort of January time, and I know there's clubs still signing people and contract renewals and stuff like that, I do kind of drop my interest a little bit in terms of the ins and outs, but certainly, I'm more interested in seeing what's happening on the field at that point in time after I have to look into the transfers and whatnot so much. So I'm not fully aware of the ins and outs and what's not.
interesting enough, they haven't, appointed a new manager. It looks like John Black's taking the team at the moment, who was kind of co-manager, assistant manager to Adam Hope. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Drumchapel how it plays out there, because I think they're at real risk of getting drawn into something that they don't want to get drawn into. Okay, just quickly then, Chris, we've got the Communities Cup taking place today. A couple of games, but Cavan Hearts versus Largs and Dundee North End versus Auchinleck Talbot. Ultimately, nearly north versus south almost in that regard. But I think for me, just looking at those two games, I know Buckhaven Hearts got a result off against Pollock, I think it was. Buckhaven Hearts, sorry. They beat Pollock in the previous round, but I think Largs are a very, very capable side. It'll be a long journey up there, and then they'll play, I think, next week, either Friday or Sunday again. So it's probably shaped up to be a Largs Auchinleck final. That probably suits the TV and the West of Scotland kind of love for the Communities Cup, but never write off Dundee North End or Buckhaven just in terms of that potential to get to the final.
A couple of years they've won the Midlands League. I don't know if they've got such a strong team this season, but certainly more than capable. But I'm always going to favour the likes of Largs because I just do anyway. But in terms of Talbot, obviously, I'm going to favour them over Dundee. So
interesting to see, certainly. And just finally, Chris, a few new teams have been added to the West of Scotland League for next season. And Bank United, returning from the amateur leagues they left during kind of COVID times, haven't been back. Castlemilk, Gartcosh United, Edelwood, and St Pat's FP, who play out of in Dumbarton somewhere. So they're good to see some fresh new teams join the West of Scotland. Chris, obviously there's going to be a gap there when 8 or 9 teams get promoted out of the West into the new Lowland League West. So it'll be good luck to all those teams, and certainly I like to look at St Pat's FP. They tried to join the West of Scotland a couple of years back between them and Knightswood on the votes, and Knightswood got in, and obviously Knightswood have been very capable and have got back-to-back promotions almost. But I think St Pat's looked like a good outfit. They looked well organised. I think Xander Diamond are certainly involved in that club. He was obviously at Broomhill for a little bit, and then that. So they're in Dumbarton, a good area for football. There'll be a couple of teams there that they can play against, and I'm sure they've been a strong army side for the last few years. So I'm sure they'll do well in the West of Scotland.
Yeah, I've actually had a wee bit of a spy for the clubs. Obviously, I need to, when new clubs go to the West of Scotland, for example, and they're not in the FM database, I essentially am the guy that has to add them in, or at least sort of do their grounds or whatever. So I had a wee spy on a couple of the clubs. Obviously, it looks like Castlemilk have a really good facility, and I think it's called Barley Football Centre.
Yeah.
I think they've got sort of the lease there that they can obviously progress that. So you'll be happy with that, Ben, obviously. Edelwood, that's how you say it. They are the same. I think their grounds, I think, grass at the moment, but I think they are planning on making it a sort of plastic pitch community sort of thing. So their facility looks really good. I mean, it's not really an exciting name. It's just Edelwood Park, so it does what it's kind of like Buffs Park, if you will, with winning. So, but yeah, the facilities look good. It's exactly what we wanted in terms of clubs.
I think a few teams are kind of waiting for things to develop in terms of grounds as well. I think there's work to be done before they join, or maybe some getting ground shares until the grounds are actually sorted out. So, no, absolutely good to see new fresh teams coming in, and obviously hope they do well and make up a good account themselves in the league. So yeah, that'll be a good one to watch, and I'm sure there'll be more probably added as well. I'm pretty sure there'll be more that will want to add themselves in. There's potentially another 4 spots, 5 spots available for teams to come in. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that develops. But that's pretty much us for this episode of the official Catchup podcast. It's been a pleasure as always. We have been back 2 weeks in a row now, and we've appreciated all the feedback and positive comments we've had from people across different social media platforms, and private messages as well that we've had people saying it's good to be back. We'll be here for the next few weeks certainly. Remember, catch us on Twitter at official Catchup, or subscribe on YouTube. Do that. It doesn't cost you anything. Appreciate any subscriptions that you can. It helps the channel. It helps us. It makes us feel better as well. So absolutely, hit those buttons. Give us your feedback, good or bad. I came out relatively unscathed from last week's episode, so that was nice to.
Well, it was great support on the first episode back. A lot of comments on Spotify and stuff like that from the gang, if you will. And no, thanks for the support. I mean, the one thing that was pissing me off about Spotify is that we were so close to Scottish rugby for some reason. Had to get that closer. So I think we're in the top 20 again, Ben, of podcasts on Spotify. So well away from Scottish rugby.
Aiming for top 5 again. We've been there before in terms of Scottish football podcast, so hopefully we'll be back in the Spotify top 5 very soon. But yeah, do all those good things. It helps us out as a channel, and who knows what will happen, in weeks to come. We'll be back next Sunday, and we'll do this. We can give Chris some live feedback and tell him know that Spurs, it's currently 0-0 at half time, or just after half time in the Spurs game. It's a rare occurrence that Chris will
miss a Spurs game, yeah. And you should be the same, Ben. We both support Spurs, to be fair, but
we do, but I don't watch the games as
religiously as I do.
Normally, in the past, we did podcasts. Chris was always like, "No, can't be this time. Spurs are playing. It's not happening." But he's decided that Spurs are so pish that we basically not going to bother watching Spurs. So I'm going to probably go and watch some Masters golf, and imagine at some point I've just seen Rangers have won 6-3 against Falkirk, which is pretty mad.
We're winning 2-0 saying at one point, yeah.
So that's interesting. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, and we'll be back soon. Cheers.